We are in the midst of one of the most impactful revolutions in NBA history.
Three-pointers.
Three-point shot.
Shooting threes.
To shoot threes.
Three-point shot.
Three-point shots.
The three-point revolution. Fueled by analytics and coupled with the simultaneous pace revolution, NBA teams are scoring more points per game than we've ever seen since the 1970s. You may be wondering, what's the cause of this drastic shift? The answer is math. We are in an age where data scientists who have never touched a hardwood in their lives are becoming just as important as some members of coaching staffs. Teams have calculated the average number of points that every type of shot will result in. It's a pretty simple formula. First, take the efficiency of the shot and multiply it by the points it yields. For example, if a player makes 40% of his left corner threes, you would do .40 multiplied by 3 points, which equals 1.2 points per shot. Take a look at this graphic by writer Kirk Goldsberry. Here you can see this formula visualized. The result of this data is that corner 3-point shots are one of the most efficient shots in the game. They result in around 1.1 to 1.2 points per shot. 3-pointers from above the break are close behind, averaging 1.05 to 1.1 points per shot. Meanwhile, mid-range shots don't even come close. Teams have responded to this math accordingly. Let's take a look at this graph presented by Flowing Data. The mid-range shot has been declining in usage for the last 15 years as the 3-point shot has been increasing in usage. However, the 3-point revolution didn't take off until this decade. According to the graph, you can see the first spike start in the early part of the 2010s, which is when Rockets GM Daryl Morey pioneered the movement after acquiring James Harden. The 3-point revolution hit full stride in the 2014-2015 season, when the Warriors proved that a team full of shooters could actually win a championship. While Daryl Morey was the trailblazer of this movement, the Splash Bros quickly became the poster boys. As you can see from this graph, right after the Warriors won the title, the percentage of mid-range shots taken compared to threes tanked. In the 2018-2019 season, only 13.5% of team shots came from the mid-range. In comparison, 35.8% of team shots were from three. Change is hard to accept, and for many older NBA fans, this revolution has been especially difficult to accept because their childhood heroes were rooted in the mid-range shot. In Michael Jordan's final MVP season, 58% of his total field goal attempts were from mid-range. In Kobe's MVP season, nearly 40% of his total field goal attempts were mid-range shots. Kobe and Jordan are two of the most influential athletes ever. Because of them, hundreds of thousands of kids have spent hours mimicking their iconic fadeaway mid-range jumpers in the driveway. But it's 2019 now, and it's extremely unlikely that a new star player will adopt the mid-range shot as their go-to like Kobe and MJ did. Instead, we now see kids working on Curry-range threes and James Harden step-backs in their driveways. Initially, it might seem like mid-range shots are more efficient because they're a closer shot and thus easier to make, but that doesn't make it more efficient. While it might be hard to grasp, I'll explain why the mid-range shot will never be efficient. The definition of efficiency is maximizing production with minimum expense. Shooting a 3 and shooting a 2 both have the same level of expense. They both cost a possession, but a 3 yields more production. It is worth 3 points. Meanwhile, a mid-range shot is worth 2 points. The league average 3-point percentage for the 2018-2019 season was 35.5%. That means on average, players collectively made 35.5% of their 3-point shots. On the other hand, the league average mid-range shot percentage for the 2018-2019 season was 40.2%. That means on average, players collectively made 40.2% of their mid-range shots. Let's do some basic math. Let's say player A shoots 40% on 100 mid-range shots in a game. Since each mid-range shot is worth 2 points, player A scored 80 points that game, which is 40 times 2. Now let's say player B shoots 35% on 100 3-point shots in the game. That means he hit 35 of those 100 3-point shots. Since each 3-point shot is worth 3 points, player B scored 105 points that game, which is 25 more points than player A on the same amount of shots. That's a huge difference. On the same number of field goals, a league average 3-point percentage is 1.32 times more efficient than a league average mid-range percentage. In fact, in order for a mid-range shot to yield an equal amount of points per shot as shooting 35% from 3, it must be shot at a 53.25% efficiency. That's incredibly difficult. For reference, in the 2018-2019 season, 83 players shot above 35.5% from 3 on respectable volume. Meanwhile, only 3 players shot above 53.25% from mid-range on respectable volume. Kevin Durant, Al Horford, and TJ McConnell. So while 83 players can shoot above league average from 3, only 3 players can match that efficiency on mid-range shots. Mid-range shots are also harder to get open looks from. Any shot inside the arc is easier to contest than any shot outside the arc just due to the proximity of defenders. When a guard drives in for a 15-foot jumper, the opposing defender can defend tighter because there's less space between the shooter and the basket. On threes, there is more open space between the shooter and the basket, so the defender has to play defense more conservatively. According to NBA stats, only 0.62% of an average team's three-point attempts are contested with the defender within 2 feet of the shooter. 0.62% is astronomically low. Assists are another huge reason why threes are less contested than mid-range shots. Let's take a look at this graphic by Fizz.org. The colors represent the percentage of mid shots that are assisted on, yellow meaning a higher proportion of shots being assisted on, while red meaning a lower proportion of shots being assisted on. As you can see, 90% of corner threes are assisted on, approximately 60 to 70% of above the break threes are assisted on. In comparison, only about 50% of mid-range shots are assisted on. And as most basketball players know, in general, assisted shots result in more open looks. Because three-point shots are more frequently assisted on, they are more frequently uncontested. Why are threes more likely to be assisted on than mid-range shots? The answer is spacing. Players can camp on the three-point line without negatively affecting their team spacing. However, players can't camp inside the arc because they will clog up driving lanes. So not only are threes worth more points, but they are, on average, less contested than mid-range shots. So is the mid-range dead? Well, yes and no. Teams will always continue shooting mid-range shots out of necessity. With a 24-second shot clock, teams can't always pick and choose their shots. And furthermore, you have to keep the defense guessing. If a team vows to never shoot any more mid-range shots, they might become a little too predictable in offense. The mid-range shot will likely never become extinct. In fact, some teams still use the mid-range shot as their bread and butter. For example, the Spurs take nearly the same amount of mid-range shots as threes. Some may call it antiquated, but they were a playoff team this season, and you can't argue that. However, this doesn't mean we'll see an increase of mid-range shots being taken. The Rockets have almost completely eliminated the mid-range shot from their playset. They attempt just 4.8 mid-range field goals per game, which is just 5.5% of their total field goals. The Rockets have become trendsetters in today's league, and soon enough other teams will follow with their approach. Whether you like analytics or not, math has changed the game of basketball.